We're here, bitches.
We're doing it again.
What episode is this? Like 10?
74.
You guys, we've only literally had like 2 episodes. Our last episode just turned into a
three-part series.
And we like cut it down to, and it was still long.
Right.
Wow.
This is technically episode 3, but we've actually filmed like 7.
Once me and Tori get through ours,
Yeah.
you know, it's on to the dumb shit.
Then it's on to like
The real fun stuff.
dumb shit,
Like sex.
like sex.
Definitely sex. I don't think Tori even thinks she has a story.
I
She's like,
don't.
guys, nothing
She's corny.
happened. I'm cool. Like, but she has no clue. She actually really does.
Well, I
Like,
have
so much trauma.
I have I definitely have drama.
Yeah.
for sure. But like
you
I feel like
underplay your trauma so often.
I do.
Don't compare it to other people.
Because you feel like, oh, people have been through way worse than me. Like,
Well, yeah. I hear your guys' story and I'm like, oh, my life was a walk in the fucking park.
no.
You know
your
what's
story is yours.
crazy is that there is actually people who comment in the DMs is like, my story seems so stupid compared to yours, and I'm over here struggling. Meanwhile, you and your sister are going, and I'm like, everybody goes through their own shit, and no one shit is easier than the next or harder than the next. Everybody, you know,
Yeah.
Right. And everyone processes trauma so differently.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So you can't undervalue your story.
right? You can't belittle it just because it's not as dramatic as
In your eyes.
Yeah.
It's similar in a completely opposite way.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah,
Because
same.
I don't think we've actually talked about your story.
I didn't grow up necessarily in like an abusive household. I had an escape. My stepmother is very much so an alcoholic who is very abusive. And when we were kids, she would verbally and sometimes physically abuse us. My father did nothing to protect us.
But how long was your parents married before he was divorced and remarried?
I was 7 when my parents got divorced.
Do you remember them being married?
A little bit. I remember my dad wasn't really, he worked a lot and he wasn't really involved, and he like always favored my sister. Like I do remember this one time that he tricked me. He had gotten tickets to like a basketball game. And he was like, oh, like there's something in the other room. And like there was nothing in the other room. And what he was doing was leaving with my sister.
Aww.
And like, so I just remember being left.
That's traumatic in itself.
Oh, but you remember that. That hurts
Yeah.
my heart.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. little
Baby, we'll
Tori.
take you to a basketball game.
That hurts my heart because I can't imagine doing that to one of my kids today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for real.
no, I remember that vividly.
Yes.
It was more, right, it was less abuse
Okay.
from him and more like neglect. Like he always, it was my sister. Like,
That's
So
mean, though.
you say less abuse. However, like I know there was like mental stuff going on.
definitely mental.
Yeah.
For sure. My dad's like, you know, he's like somebody who can't really take accountability.
So that definitely affected you as a child because you watched your parents' relationship. You watched it
Yeah.
fall apart and then him going into another toxic relationship.
Yes. Once he met his current wife, that's when the real like trauma and abuse started.
Okay.
She would like, she hated the fact that my sister and I were from a different marriage. And so I guess we were that constant reminder. And so, she would manipulate and basically like still to this day, I'm 33 and I don't see her anymore, but when I did, she would buy presents for my father for like Father's Day just from her and my father's other daughter that's from the two of them, and would like make it known that like it was just the two of them. Like, you know, she never wanted my sister and I to be involved.
That's sad.
See,
Such scum.
you have like the kids now
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Xhejlan. I have kids with her from different
yeah.
like relationships, and I can't imagine
That'd be
looking
so
at them
hurtful.
like that.
Yeah.
Excluding.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
like that's awful. And I have a hard. I can't even treat my daughter differently from them. Like I make sure like they're
You want to treat everybody equal.
equally.
But
Yeah.
that also creates such insecurity as a child and abandonment issues
Yeah.
like up the ass.
Oh hell yeah. And my father never, my stepmother would get very drunk and so it was very like the family would come over, she would play this, put on this face to everybody, so everybody, my whole entire family thought that she was the nicest person to us.
So she was very covert.
Yes. The minute the doors closed and the last person left the house and it was just us, the four of us, she turned into a completely different person. Like taking money from us. Like for our birthdays, we would have to open our cards in front of her. And she would like take our money 'cause she was putting it in a bank account for us. Like,
did your dad see these things happening?
Yeah.
And he didn't protect you from it?
Never.
And you obviously still have a relationship with your dad.
It's rocky. I love him because he's my dad, but it'll never be what it is like with my mom. Like my relationship with my mom is very close, and I'll never have that
more
relationship.
rock solid.
Yeah, I'll never have that relationship with him because he still to this day enables her alcoholism. She's still very much an abusive alcoholic. Like she took out, my family probably doesn't even know this, but she went after my grandmother with knives and like
Oh my God.
She was just like a very violent,
Scary.
cops were always called, and but why I don't think, like why when I compare, I had an escape. I could always go home to my mother.
Didn't
But
matter.
like it doesn't matter because you still
You
had to be there.
experienced it.
You still had to go through it. And also like you ended up wanting your dad's love so much that you've now carried it through to adulthood to where you feel most responsible to keep a relationship in a way.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Like I spent a lot of time trying to prove my worthiness to my father. And that translated into every adult relationship that I had until I met Xhejlan. Like holding and also mirroring him in the sense that he has such a hard time letting go of my stepmother still.
Yeah.
And so I watched that and grew up thinking no matter what somebody puts you through, no matter what toxicity, you have to stay.
Yeah.
And so I remained in relationships.
That's funny because I had that same mentality.
Right.
And I stayed in, I thought I had to because my mom and dad did the same thing.
Right. Like you think you have
They
to
just
stick
stuck it out. Yeah.
I also feel like you didn't have self-worth because you were basically like the stepchild, like Cinderella in a way.
Yeah.
And so you didn't really feel worthy of love. No, you were not made to feel like you were a priority.
100%.
Right.
So you literally grew up with that idea that you weren't a priority to anybody. And now you even still to this day undervalue yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Constantly.
It's funny because
she
so many
does.
people see it now, even on the podcast. And I don't notice it because it's just
It's
how
like
I
normal talk to you.
Right.
Normal
It's just
self-talk,
how I live.
the lies that you've fed yourself for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we constantly call you out on it.
We're like, Tori,
Tori,
stop
guys,
putting yourself
Like
down.
shut the fuck up.
Like you're worthy, just as worthy as any of the rest of us.
My therapist used to do it too because I spent years in therapy, and she would be like, "Why do you value your trauma? What's it called? Like undersell it or whatever? Like I didn't think it was that big of a deal." And she's like, "You have like triggers," and I'm like, "I do."
I did the same thing.
Right.
I did the same thing with her. And I'm like, well, who cares? I mean, I went through it. It's gone now. It's part of the past. Like, who gives a shit? But technically, I'm like, I really was still hanging on to it. It was still affecting my day to day. But you
created a whole personality.
Yeah.
You think that you've like slid through, right? And then I'll be like, do you know that you behave this way because XYZ? And she's like, oh.
Right.
Well, that makes sense.
Now that clicks.
because we went through it already, right? We're not
It's like-
we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
We're in a different stage in our
Right.
life. We're like, okay.
But you don't realize,
tough.
like you said in the last episode, it's where your brain is still stuck there. You just don't realize that you're not
You're
Your
there.
body
Yeah,
doesn't
your
realize.
body.
Because you're with your body, but at the same time, like
Right.
I still find myself like my father wasn't, like I said, he wasn't abusive, but he was very nitpicky. And so like there was one day not too long ago, a couple months ago, probably over the summer, I had to spend a whole day with him, and I didn't even notice. And after he left, I just sat there and I texted Xhejlan and I was like, I don't know why, but I just feel like the lowest piece of shit right now. Like I feel like like negative value.
Like he ripped you apart.
It was just all day, just these little things like, oh, why your ears look like that? Like,
oh,
just
my
right.
God. It's because he's so. And
he's an insecure
do you mind
man.
if I say things like
you
that?
can say whatever the fuck you want.
He's so insecure with himself that
Maybe,
But that's sad
devaluing
that
you because he sees so much potential in you. He sees how bright of a star you are.
right.
And that's such narcissistic behavior to devalue someone to make themselves feel bigger.
Yeah.
Because when you're around him, you make him feel little.
See, now that you're speaking on it, because these are things like
You're
these,
thinking about
now
it.
I'm thinking about it, yes, but now I see how it affects you today. The difference of you then and now is huge, but I still see how much it's affected
It really
you.
does
And now I
affect
see when you speak on it how
It's molded
deep
you.
it is.
yes,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
where
yeah,
it comes from. So I'm understand, like as we're talking, I'm getting you.